conversation tonight is going to be about what makes coffee good and what makes coffee cheap. And when I say good, what I meant was like morally good, but we can talk about quality as well. So from that long introduction, I'd like to go to Holly so she can explain the model of Thread Coffee, how we import coffee from smallholder farms versus other sourcing strategies.
Thank you, Nani. So basically, just to describe, I guess, what I would think the industry standard of sourcing in specialty coffee would be pretty much sourcing according to, does the coffee taste good and what kind of flavor profiles does the coffee have? Which is, obviously coffee is consumed, so we want to think first and foremost about the taste, right? That seems obvious, but I think throughout this conversation we'll be highlighting ways in which there's a lot more going on, there's a lot more at stake here than whether or not the coffee tastes quote-unquote good or has a certain score. So basically, most places would source according to what kind of flavor profile they want. Maybe they have an espresso blend that has to meet a certain flavor profile, and we'll source coffees that meet that flavor profile. Another thing could be cup score. For those who aren't coffee professionals, coffees are kind of scored by this international standard through tasting in a very standardized, very scientific way. And coffee is awarded a score, and it has to be above 80 points. It goes up to 100. It has to be above 80 points to be considered specialty coffee. So maybe a roaster would say, I only want to source coffees that are above an 85. I will not look at any other coffees, they're dead to me. So cup score could be one. Price could be another thing, like we need to get it below this price point in order for it to make sense. Obviously, we're in business here, we need to, make a profit, blah, blah, blah. Another thing could be origin, like we really want to bring in some Rwandan coffee, this season, because we really like the flavor characteristics of that. And basically, just kind of almost like a consumer in a grocery store where you're walking down the aisles of cereal or like Pop-Tarts or something where there's like a million choices, and you're thinking like, okay, what flavors do I want? What's my price point? What's my budget for this Pop-Tart? And you're also drawn by things like branding or packaging, maybe some roasters could be really, their interest could be piqued by like a particular story or particular presentation. But basically you have the choice. You're like, I'm gonna pick this one, I'm gonna buy it. If I don't like it, I'm not gonna buy it again. And that's kind of where I think a lot of the sourcing models in the industry, it's would be kind of like the standard, I guess. Not to say that places don't have long-term relationships, which we'll talk about when we talk more about direct trade. But I think there's a certain amount of like fickleness and volubility built into the standard sourcing model to where it could be subject to like market trends, like maybe a certain type of processing is really trendy one season and everybody's trying to buy that. But then next season it's like so over and nobody wants to buy that anymore, but like the farmers had just like put all this money into, like producing this coffee, which is basically like having a baby, like it takes like basically a whole year to produce a crop. So I think from where what we're trying to do, and it's not just us obviously, like we're very small, this is like definitely something that's a lot bigger than us, but is a sourcing model that's based on long-term relationships, buying from the same producers every year, and buying from particularly co-ops. So we're a co-op, but also producers and farmers have their own co-ops. Basically, it's an interesting thing to note that 60% of coffee comes from smallholder farms. So those would be farmers that own or that have less than 5 hectares or 12 acres of land. So a very small amount, and they probably only produce like a few bags of coffee every year. So by themselves, they're not really able to leverage any position in the international market, that it's hard for them to get access to credit, to come on higher prices for their coffee, or to reinvest in their farms. So basically, co-ops are formed by smallholder farmers who are coming together to pool their resources so that they can kind of like together as an organization come on higher prices in the international market, and also pool their resources to reinvest in their farms. So we only buy from co-ops. We buy from the same co-ops year after year. We make commitments a year, 2 years in advance, so that we're saying to the farmers basically, we're gonna buy your coffee. We're gonna buy this much of your coffee, and it's like a contract. It's something that provides stability on both sides. For us, we know we're going to be getting this coffee, and they know they're going to have someone to buy that coffee. And that it kind of helps to mitigate a lot of like the risk and volatility that's in the market, that's just inherent in any agricultural product. It's just inherent in capitalism, you know, the boom and bust cycles. So basically, yes, we source according to principles that are not quantified or encapsulated by a score on the cupping table or a flavor profile. It's more about who do we want to be supporting, because buying coffee is a way to sustain people's living. Well, I was going to talk about Cooperative Coffees, which is the importer co-op that we just became members of last year. We've been buying from them since Thread was started in 2012. But basically, they're a co-op, meaning that they're owned by the roasters who buy the coffee. So there's no like top, person, CEO, whatever, that's profiting from all of it. It's all owned by the roaster members, and now we are one of the roaster members. So we're a co-op buying coffee from a co-op who buy coffee from co-ops. There's a lot of co-ops in the supply chain for us, which is basically kind of like I think it's probably the best solution that we have at this time. We're going to talk more about solutions, but just to kind of explain, there's basically Cooperative Coffees. There's 23 roasters in the United States, and and Canada too. And we all own like a piece of the importing company, and we source from the same co-ops, from the same producer co-ops year after year, have those long-term relationships, make those commitments out into the future, and pay as much as possible, basically, is the idea. And we offer a level of transparency that's unusual, I guess, in the industry, to where like us, even before we were members, like we could access like every single contract that was made with the farmers and see exactly how much our importing company is paying for each lot of coffee. Which is just not really information that you're given if you just, as a roaster, buy from any importer. Like, they're not going to tell you, like, here's our contract with the farmers, like, here's exactly what we agreed with them. Like, it's much more smoke and mirrors, mysterious. They'll just be like, oh yeah, he's a great guy, like, we pay them really well, like, we have a great relationship or whatever, but you'll never actually see the numbers on the piece of paper. So that is something that to us is really important, having that level of transparency that we can then show that to our customers, to our clients, and say, we know exactly where this coffee is coming from and how much it was paid for, or how much we paid for it. So also it's kind of, it gives us, like, as coffee professionals, access to this democratic structure. Where we both participate on committees in the co-op to basically like govern the co-op from within, and it's very cool. Like, organization. Do you have anything to add? I don't know, just waffling
Wow,
now.
so much so. I'm so sorry. This is like kind of dense, but us joining Co-op Coffees is transformative for our personal careers, but also for the company. But being that engaged at that level, it's just like transcended our experience in the coffee world. So it's really hard to like put it into words because it's a little convoluted. But like, just rest assured, we're doing good stuff. It's real good. If you have questions, we're gonna have the Q&A part in a few minutes.
I think anyone who's ever been in a society knows that, we get more done together than we do alone. We can accomplish incredible things when we come together and cooperate with each other versus trying to do something by yourself as an individual. So I think it's really just the same very simple principle applied to, economics in the coffee supply chain, like efforts that are led by the producers or on our side, the baristas, the roasters, are much more powerful and effective at actually changing things for the better than some State Department or NGO coming in and saying, okay, we got a flow chart here and we got a bunch of money and we're just gonna kind of do this thing. Like, I think that the co-ops that I'll give you an example here. So COMSA is one of the co-ops in Honduras that we buy from. And they have about 1,200 members. They actually have a waiting list of people who are trying to get into the co-op. They have a full-time staff, so basically the co-op is generating enough profit that they can pay people to work full-time. And they have 44 people who are full-time, just like running the co-op. And they have, basically, they're all smallholder farmers, but they've pooled their resources to such an extent that they are really like leading the way in terms of sustainability. Like, they have this entire very complex and efficient waste management process where basically they're basically kind of eliminating or using like waste products and composting, basically everything, to make fertilizer that then they're selling to other farmers who aren't coffee farmers. And it's like this huge operation that they're doing as well as growing coffee because they're able to combine their resources, they're able to combine their knowledge, they're able to channel those resources into getting like really sophisticated education and technologies, and they really put an emphasis on community education. Like, they see, especially women and youth as like the future of their community, so they're able to allocate resources to education and stuff that I think that a regular sort of top-down approach would not consider to be important. But since they are, the ones who are engaged in the everyday existence, they know what they need. And I think that's really the point, is that with these top-down sort of things, like Karl was saying, you can make a plan from the United States about what these people are going to do over there, but the people who are actually over there doing the thing know what they need, they know what resources they have, and they know how to cooperate to achieve things, but they're never given that chance to actually just do it. And I just wanted to briefly segue to talk about union organization in the United States, which is very relevant right now, especially in the coffee industry. Baristas are organizing at like an insane rate, compared to what the labor industry has basically been for the last 10, 20, 30 years or so, which is pretty depressing. But the pandemic has obviously fueled a lot of need for organization and cooperation, and has achieved some amazing wins, like the Starbucks union drive has just taken off incredibly, and I think that's like a really good example of why we can achieve a lot more together than we can as individuals, because the people that are doing the thing every day, the people who are in the shop every day, know what needs to happen better than anyone else, and they're the ones who are in the perfect position to make the changes that will actually last, and they can do that best when they come together and actually take a stand. And I think that's kind of the point. It's like, yes, together is better. The people on the ground are the ones who are going to achieve actual change.
I have one more example, but it's not related to our specific coffee supply chain, but there's a farmer-owned group in California called Pachamama Roasters. Now, don't change your loyalty to Thread because of this, but Pachamama is very cool because they're a farmer-owned roastery. They have several cafes in California, and the farmer-owned model is that the farmers are on the board, so they're the ones selling the coffee. It's kind of I couldn't tell you all the details now, but I did write about it in a Roast magazine article last year. You should check that out. And then I go into all the details about it, but it's very empowering, and it's the only model I've ever found where the farmers actually have ownership on like the entirety of it, like vertical integration, which is kind of cool. And then Karl will share some really good examples of bottom up.
Okay, yeah, so I guess this is a question for Thread mostly. From the co-op side, do you actively look at the C market and base purchases off of that, or would you say that's more dictated by domestic Starbucks and more the C market is more controlled and dictated by that rather than the specialty industry?
Okay, so I'm not very, very good at the economic side of coffee trade, but I am boringly on the finance committee for Co-op Coffees, and we talk about this a lot because this year we got into coffee futures. Is anybody here trading on the stock market at the time? No, okay, I'm gonna keep it super simple then. So the answer is like kind of yes and no, right? We have existing relationships with these co-ops for, Co-op Coffees has been around since the 90s, so it's 20 years old. So they have very long-lasting relationships with the cooperatives, and it's kind of understood that we expect a certain quality and they'll give us a certain price, and we kind of start from historical records, less so from the C market. But the future trading, I think, so futures is interesting, and I don't want to get like too heavy into it, but basically if I was a trader and I had nothing to do with coffee, I could make a bet that something, it's too much negativity. I could make a bet that something would happen in the coffee market. Like the C market price will go down, and I'll make that bet, and it'll be like a short future contract or whatever. And if that happens, then I get paid. And I could not even be in the coffee market at all, and that's speculation. And that kind of messes up the coffee price as well. So you have supply and demand, and you have speculation. So the answer to your question is no, we don't really do that. We're trying to focus on farmer relationships, quality, fair trade, organic. We have the impact fund. So we kind of start from historical instead of the C market. But we've been using futures to actually help the farmers. And our bankers have told us, you're not using futures right. You could actually be cashing in earlier and you'd be making money. And we're like, but you don't understand, that's not what we're doing. And so we've been in these weird conversations with them where they don't actually understand what we're doing and they don't know why we're doing it, but it is for the farmers, so that when they close, that we have this future contract. Anyway, I thought it was interesting that they were like, you're doing it wrong. You're doing capitalism wrong. And we're like, yeah, we know, bro. Any other questions?
Love to discuss this thing. So this is a softball question. Say, here in Baltimore, we've got, so we have access to great co-op based coffee shop. There are good resources for our friends and family who are outside of Baltimore, providing their local co-op coffee shop.
If they do live in Richmond, Virginia, Afterglow Coffee is one. A friend of mine that is one of the members. They used to be Lamplighter, now they're called Afterglow. Or at Pachamama in Sacramento. I'm sure there are a lot more. I don't know them.
I don't know the if there's a database for like sick coffee places to go that have good ethics. But maybe that's like
Just coffee.
yeah, there's so many. Well, okay, yeah. So if you want to know more about co-op coffees, there's 24 roaster members in our co-op. So if you have family that's in Michigan or in Georgia or in Canada, you could go to coopcoffees.com and you can see the roaster member map. So that's a good resource. I actually forgot about that. But then otherwise, I'm not sure. Maybe hashtags. You know, they're very hashtag. I don't know. Other questions? Go ahead.
It sounded like that statistic that like 60% of buyers are 5 or 6 companies. Is that a lack of like fragmentation, or is it that in combination with kind of those 5 or 6 buyers having an inordinate amount of power because of what courses, and like is that a worthwhile cause to look at that element of the whole picture, and what can cafes do or you guys do in that, other than being part of a co-op or one of those that isn't 60% and trying to claim that power, what are big picture, what are things that can be done in that way?
I don't know that, just to piggyback off of some things that Karl said, I can't believe I just said piggyback off of him. Sorry, I apologize. But anyways, so one of the things that was kind of notable in a recent co-op call that I had, Co-op Coffees, the importer call, was that we collectively import, I think like 5 million pounds of coffee. This is a very significant amount of coffee. But that almost all of that coffee is sold or committed to before it leaves the country. So this isn't common, I don't think, and importer, it's not usually how it works. Like they'll make a big risk and they'll bring in all this coffee and then they'll sell it at the market value or whatever. But with Co-op Coffees, the model is that we're all roaster members and we all know our volumes and we're committing to purchase the coffee. So it's leaving the farm and it has a buyer already, and that's not common. And another thing that Co-op Coffees doesn't do is we don't ask for terms. We always pay the farmers up front and the co-ops up front.